This is the most fun, satisfying, and unhinged build I've played so far as a warrior in PoE. And even more impressive, it's also the strongest warrior build I've played so far. It blows up the entire screen in white, gooey explosions, crushes pinnacle bosses, and it does all of this on a budget of... Wait, what? That can't be right. 1 divine? Yep, I shit you not. You need pretty much nothing to get the build online. A few stats on your gear, a cheap-ass unique, and you're up and running. And overall, I've spent less than a divine on my shitty gear. But as a lovely treat for you, I know most of you rolled a druid, and I'm going to help you out on that front as well. Because we're not just covering this magnificent setup, I'll also take you through leveling, early maps, and the endgame setup. I've also got an ultra endgame setup ready, but we'll wait for that and focus on the dogshit newbies for now. The video is long enough, and on that note, timestamps are found below. All right, Mr. Big Penis Man, tell me how the build works now, please. Fine. What you're witnessing is herald chaining. We're triggering the herald chaining by using Sunder, followed by dealing cold damage, chilling enemies, and triggering pole circle. You won't need this ring once you have sufficient damage, but for all the newbies out there, you definitely do. Because once enemies can be shattered, our Herald of Ice can trigger. And once Herald of Ice triggers, shit truly explodes. But we can do better than that. Because by including Armor Explosion, we can have Herald of Ice trigger Armor Explosion, and Armor Explosion trigger Herald of Ice. Should make sense, right? False. Because our white gooey pie is still missing 2 key ingredients, the first one being Armor Break 3. Using this, we'll break armor and in turn trigger Armor Explosion. Unfortunately, Herald of Ice doesn't deal any physical damage, but by crafting a weapon with gained as physical damage, it actually does deal physical damage, which means it can break armor and trigger Armor Explosion. The second key ingredient is simply to slot in Cold Attunement. Using this, our Armor Explosion now deals cold damage as well, meaning it can chill enemies. And when it chills, not only does it allow for my intro to actually make sense, but also Holkirkel makes sure enemies can be shattered, which triggers Herald of Ice, which triggers Armor Explosion, which sets off a Loot Explosion. Lovely, huh? Yeah, I agree. And as a bonus, this interaction also generates endurance charges and armor for us. More on that later. Alright, what else are we doing in the build that you need to be aware of? Well, while Sunder is absolutely fantastic at scaling AoE and shooting off fishes everywhere that blow up the entire screen, it's absolute hot garbage at killing bosses. So, to solve this, we're incorporating molten fishes via Forge Hammer and Earth Shatter. Want to know what's great about all these skills, including Sunder? That's right, they all spawn fishes, meaning we can scale them all at once for more fishes and, in turn, more damage. And how do we actually deal damage with these skills? It's beautiful, really, because not only do they interact with each other via fishes, but they also trigger each other. To start a boss fight, we're always throwing out a Forge Hammer and some Earth Shatter. They both blow up together when we use a shout. And once they've blown up, we use Earth Shatter, which is a slam skill, mind you, meaning it triggers the molten fishes from Forge Hammer, and then we shout to blow them up again and repeat. This interaction deals so much goddamn damage that once you've got some actual gear, you'll one-shot T3 pinnacles without them being able to fight back. Now, when it comes to the actual gameplay, what I've shown so far is the endgame variant, but the build will play differently in leveling, early maps, and endgame. So let's see how it looks in the different parts and how you play it, starting with leveling. Here, we're going to rely on Rolling Slam and Bone Shatter. You've probably seen this interaction before, as it's a classic and by far the strongest warrior leveling build. It works simply by you using Rolling Slam and interrupting the second animation by following it up with a Bone Shatter, which will ideally stun the enemies and make a big explosion. It does vary a bit though. For example, if you found yourself a banger weapon, then you may just find yourself either one-shotting or instantly stunning everything before being able to use your Bone Shatter. In that case, just don't use Bone Shatter and focus on Rolling Slam instead. This may be too much thinking for you to do during a campaign run though, so you can just slot in Brink into your Rolling Slam so it can't stun, and then the rotation will always look the same. Rolling Slam, Bone Shatter, repeat. And for bossing, it doesn't really get easier than leveling with this build. All you do is, you hold down the Rolling Slam button. Eventually it'll stun the boss, allowing you to fully AFK while killing him and dealing a bunch of extra damage in the process. Now, when it comes to the early maps, we'll have an actual build online. I recommend swapping to this setup at around Act 3 to 4, as you'll then have all of your skills unlocked. Here we can start using Earth Shatter, Forge Hammer, and all of the other goodies. I do, however, not recommend going for a full Sunder setup yet. This is due to Sunder being slow as fuck without attack speed. And due to this, you can easily get interrupted when casting it unless you've got some passive tree points to invest in attack speed, along with being able to stack up some stun threshold. And on top of that, you really want a 6-link in your Herald of Ice before it starts popping off. Once this is complete though, you just swap and never look back. Alright, but how do we play it until then? Easy. Everything except spamming Sunder will be the same as in the endgame version we showed, but instead of Sunder for clear, we're utilizing Leap Slam, because we can combine this with Crater to spawn fishes for extra clear. And why Leap Slam? Well, you're not going to get interrupted while casting it, which is why it's great for early mapping. And since we're not using Herald of Ice here, we can instead slot in Herald of Blood and use Herald of Blood chaining until we're ready to swap to the Sunder version. Everything else, though, stays the same between the two versions. You're going to use Earth Shatter and your shouts on bosses, and when you're in melee range or fighting rough elites, along with using the Wombo combo with Forge Hammer on bosses. It's also fantastic to use the Wombo combo in rituals, as you're just covering the entire screen in bullshit, and everything dies in an instant. Okay, friends, great job if you've stuck it out this far. Let's head over to the gearing section now, and we'll check out what you need before hopping onto the Sunder version. Spoiler though, it's not a whole lot, starting with the weapon. This one cost me about half a divine to craft. I'll drop a crafting guide in the description, but you're simply starting with a magic base with increased physical damage. Then you slam a physical essence, and the gain does physical, followed by slamming an onslaught and plus attack skills essence, desecrate, and you're done. Easy as that. And if you don't want to do that, then it's at least important that you grab a gain as physical damage roll here. Because without this, your Herald of Ice doesn't deal physical damage, and you can't use Armor Break. The other option is using the UL's Embrace support gem, but that shit costs like 25 divines, so that's a no thanks from me. We're also using a weapon swap for bosses here, because there, you don't need Onslaught, and all you care about is getting as much damage as possible. So just look at the DPS here, while getting additional skill ranks and preferably also extra fishes via the Desecration. When it comes to the other gear pieces, we're rocking two uniques here. The Brass Dome Champion Cuirass is fucking nasty, granting more armor than any other chest piece in the game, along with making you immune to crits. For the other unique, we're using Pole Chirkun to instantly shatter enemies. You can play without this, but you're going to need a fuck ton of cold damage, so it's easier to just rely on this item to shatter enemies. And it also costs close to nothing, so that's a bonus. For all of your other gear, you've got a few priorities. The first one being defenses. Because honestly, you've got so much damage that you can afford to spare a lot of your stats on defenses instead. So look to get resistance capped, a lot of max life, armor, and armor applies to elemental damage. Then once you've done that, you can start looking at the damage. Your main multipliers are melee ranks, which you can get on your gloves and amulet, along with flat damage on your second ring and gloves. And as your final priority, you just grab item rarity anywhere you can, because that shit's still broken, and as an anoint, I'm using Distant Dreamer as its solid damage, but also some much-needed chaos resistance. Yummers. Now if you want to swap to Giant's Blood later on, then you will have to grab strength pretty much everywhere as well. So if you want to continue and progress with the build, then you may want to consider that as well. Alright, so that's the gear. Next we'll check out the skill gems. For the leveling and late act setup, I'll refer you over to the planner. And starting us right off, we have Earth Shatter. This skill deals a fuck ton of physical damage, so we'll have it break armor instantly on bosses. We support it further via branching fissures, so we only need to press it twice before using our war cries to explode them on bosses, and once when mapping. We then have rapid attacks for some attack speed, along with heft and heavy swing for extra damage. Next, we have our Infernal Cry and Seismic Cry. Generally, you want to be using Infernal Cry the most, due to its big chunk of extra fire damage. Seismic Cry, on the other hand, is great once you've got an enemy stunned. So for bosses, 2 Infernal Cry combos followed by Seismic Cry combos is what I typically do. To support it, we have Raging Cry to generate rage quickly, Tireless for additional empowers, Second Wind to generate an extra charge for it, and Cooldown Recovery for, well, some cooldown recovery. And for Seismic Cry, we just use the same support gems. Then, onto our Heralds. Here, I'm using Herald of Ash for 3 reasons. Extra clear, it's great in Delirium, and it looks cool. It is, however, Herald of Ice doing the bulk of the job when AoE clearing. We have Armor Break 3 to break armor, and as I said in the intro, this not only combos with Armor Explosion, but we're also getting stacks for Scavenged Plating via this, boosting our armor by 40%. We then have Armor Demolisher for extra armor break, along with Cold Attunement to make Armor Explosion deal cold damage, and in turn, trigger Herald of Ice again. And finally, Magnified Area for some extra AoE. Then, onto our Forge Hammer. It works by you dropping it down, shouting at it, and then you slam it to trigger extra Molten Fissures. Here all we care about is damage, so we grab Elemental Armament, Concentrated Area, Fist of War, and Ambrosia, where Ambrosia not only grants it a shit ton of lightning damage, but it will also be used to have Forge Hammer shock bosses. Important to note here though, you abso-fucking-lutely need to buy a mana flask with a lot of extra increased charges for it to deal maximum damage. And finally, Fire Penetration, for extra damage when enemies have a lot of resistances. When it comes to Sunder, we want to have it deal cold damage, so we grab Cold Attunement and Embitter. You can replace Embitter for extra damage if you want, but having extra cold damage ensures that we're always chilling all enemies enough for Polshirkon to trigger. You then want Calm's Madness. This not only creates additional fissures, but it also sends them out in a big-ass cone in front of you, which when combined with extra AoE of attacks, covers the entire fucking screen. Finally, Magnified Area for even more AoE and rapid attacks to cast the skill faster. Then, for the final 2 skills, I'm using Scavenged Plating in both weapon sets for extra armor and Overwhelming Presence only in weapon set 2. This ensures that I quickly stun bosses, mainly so they can't do shit, but also for extra damage. And the only reason I don't have it on in both weapon sets is because I don't have any Spirit Roll. If you do, then feel free to use it in both. Otherwise, ditch one of the Heralds in weapon set 2 and have Overwhelming Presence instead. It's also possible to slot in Ancestral Cry for some extra damage and AoE here, or Berserk for some damage. It's up to you, friend. They're all great options. Hey, great job, friends. Gems complete, and just in time, seeing as it's just about passive tree of fucking clock, and you know it, baby. Starting us right off, we're obviously rocking the Titan Ascendancy because it's badass as hell. Since we use the insanely strong brass dome chest with a bunch of armor, we're using stone skin for even more armor. I'm also using mysterious lineage for max life, as I have more than enough damage. If you're fine on the defense department, then crushing impacts or earthbreaker are both great options as well. The best part about being a Titan, though, is obviously the extra backpack. Okay, fine. It's the next best part, because the best one is actually hulking form, granting us a 50% extra bonus from all small passive skills. Just lovely. Heading off to the actual tree, the green part is weapon set 2, that is the high damage bossing setup, and the pinkish orange, or whatever the hell this color is for mapping, as this weapon set will grab more defenses and more attack speed for a smooth mapping experience. First, we grab some damage, along with even more armor from our body armor. Moving down, we find some damage along with gain as extra fire damage and attack speed for weapon set 1 and damage for weapon set 2. After that, we move downwards to the right, where we find the most important node in possibly the entire tree, Rage on Hit. This will serve as your main rage generator all the way from the campaign to end game, where you then can grab a jewel with this instead if you prefer. But it's just one node, so it's definitely worth it. Other than that, we have just a bunch of attack speed for weapon set 1 here, along with damage for weapon set 2. Moving back again, we find some additional armor and stun threshold, which is insanely important when using Sunder, because I just hate being interrupted when casting my skills, so we'll grab quite a bit of this. We then find a bunch of damage, some strength for a lot of extra max life, our main way of obtaining accuracy, which is via the strength that we're stacking and combining it with nimble strength. We then have more damage, more strength, and this whole big-ass cluster generating afterslams and multiplicative damage once we've stunned bosses. After that, we go back up to find max life and stun threshold, max life and damage, and all of these lovely nodes. We have armor and armor break for weapon set 1, some extra elemental armor rolls also for weapon set 1, and prism guard for both weapon sets. And why not just weapon set 1 for that one as well? Well, we're going to use an Against the Darkness jewel here later, allowing us to benefit from all of these notables by turning them into extra damage. But for now, just deal with it. Then we have even more armor, some extra fissures, and extra damage for weapon set 1. And that, my friends, is the passive tree. If you want to make any changes, feel free. For example, you can ditch some defensive nodes in set 2 and go for more damage if you want. But personally, I found this enough to tank bosses with my shitty gear, so I just went with it. Alright folks, so that's pretty much all you need to know about the build. But considering most of you probably skipped 90% of the video, let's just make sure that everyone fully understands how to play the build and put the comboing together one final time for the Sunder version. When mapping, it's extremely easy. You're using Sunder for pretty much everything. When you're in melee range though, it's better to just use Earth Shatter and your War Cries, as it not only deals more damage, but it's also faster to cast. There is, however, a bug with Earth Shatter that you need to be aware of, and that is, if you dump it into certain terrain, it won't work, so don't just blindly use it all the time. When doing rituals, and at the start of breaches, I typically also drop down a Forge Hammer, use my Shout, and everything will just keep melting as you're spamming Sunders into it. And finally, bosses. Here you want to stack up 2 Earth Shatters and a Forge Hammer before they spawn, followed by blowing it up with Infernal Cry, using Earth Shatter 2 times, blow it up, repeat, and use your Seismic Cry instead once your Infernal Cries are on cooldown. If the boss doesn't die even though you've used all of your War Cries, then just keep spamming Earth Shatter and it'll die eventually. Hey, will you look at that? We managed to complete this whole guide. Now go have some goddamn fun with this build, drop a sub, and I'll see you in the next one.
So long, gay boys!